Hey, welcome to today's episode of Help Supplement Business Mastery. Today, I'm sitting with a guest, Michael Bush. I'm really looking forward to talking with Michael. Michael is the founder of Growth Ways. He has 30 plus years experience in the natural health products and healthcare space. He has even sold a probiotic company for $150 million, over $150 million, in fact. He's on several boards and he's also written Guardrail. So what I talked with Michael about today is really how to structure your supplement business, how to build your supplement business for that ultimate sale, for the ultimate sale in mind that's down the road. So Michael, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, you're welcome. I read your book. I really enjoyed your philosophy of like starting with the end first.
Yeah, I love it. I love the supplement space. We're deeply involved in it, and love sharing this. Sharing the path that we've taken over the years to see if we can help others.
Yeah, fantastic. So in your book, Guardrailing, you talk about really starting with the destination in mind, really defining the exit strategy from day one, right? That's a really big, lofty kind of decision. When people start, they really don't have a clear guide. But I mean, I'm totally agree with you, right? But what does a typical kind of plan look like for like selling, or a timeline for a plan look like for selling a supplement company?
It really depends on the individual. And so the exercise that I normally will take people through is it's actually kind of fun, where we'll say, okay, you're starting a supplement company, for say. It's you're going to be selling a new omega-3 that's made from algae or whatever the case may be. And I'll ask you, I'll say, okay, now how much money do you need to feel good about what you've done and to consider this a successful business and you're ready to let it go to somebody else? And they're usually like, well, this is far too early to figure that out, isn't it? I'm like, no, because the way you build your business will really depend on what you ultimately want to do with it. And so they say, okay, I want to sell this business in 5 years for $10 million. So that becomes pretty easy math. You look at it and you go, okay, in this particular space, the multiples of EBITDA maybe, let's say, 13 times. I think that's what they've been, 13.3 times, over the last 20 years or so. So you calculate their EBITDA that they need. So in order to sell for 13 times EBITDA, and if they're going to sell for 10 million bucks, they're going to need, like, what's that, 750, 800,000 in EBITDA. So then they need to say, okay, then we need to, one of the things I ask them to do is I say, okay, now identify specifically which companies may buy your particular company. And it's usually we'll sit down and we'll name a couple of strategics and a couple of private equity firms, because typically in a startup type world, where you're going to be selling a company so that it can continue on, it's either going to go to a private equity firm that's going to grow it, bundle it up, or just pour more gas on it and grow it,
Mm-hmm.
or you're going to sell it to a strategic who's going to add it to their product line. You'll sell it to, Garden of Life or to whomever, or another direct to consumer brand, or a direct to practitioner brand. And so you'll know when you start your business, then you'll know who you want to sell your business to, for how much, and now it becomes, you develop your product and you have to margin price backwards. You say, okay, in order to generate that kind of EBITDA at some point in time, we're going to need to be at, let's just pick a number, 70% gross margin, 80% gross margin, whatever the number happens to be. And our net margins will ultimately be X once we have established, what our overhead's going to be and things like that. Typically with direct to consumer businesses, it's nice because there's less overhead. You're typically not, you're not manufacturing yourself and things like that. So your margins are pretty predictable. And so you can literally sit down before you start your business or during the process of starting your business and say, okay, I need to get this business to $3 million in sales and 800,000 in EBITDA, or 4 million in sales and 800,000 in EBITDA, whatever it works out to be, whatever your gross margin structure becomes to get you that EBITDA. You now know how big you need to grow your business. Because a lot of people think, well, if I want to sell my business for $10 million, I need to be doing $10 million in revenue. How in the heck am I going to do $10 million in revenue? Maybe I've sold before, maybe I'm a first time entrepreneur. $10 million seems like a pretty heavy lift. But then once you really look at it and you've realized that you don't need to be doing 10 million in revenue, you need to be doing 3.5 or 4,
Mm.
it just seems more reasonable and it seems more of an attainable goal. And it is more realistic rather than shooting super high and missing. I've always encouraged people to be really realistic and do everything they can do to hit their numbers on a, on an ongoing basis. And so by doing that, you can build systems that allow you to kind of automate your business in such a way that you can depend on those margin profiles and you can depend on building things, because there's a million other decisions you're going to have to make along the way, especially at the beginning, to make sure that you don't do something that could decrease your long-term value of your business. I mean, I've seen people license ingredients, do a license on an ingredient. And when they go to sell their business, they find out that that license they signed doesn't transfer. It's not assignable. And so they built this business. They're doing $10 million, $20 million in revenue, but they cannot, when they sell their business, they're going to lose the right to sell that ingredient. And that's a problem. But
Yeah.
and it's one of those things you have to think about right from the beginning. If you have a co-packer, can your co-packer handle your volumes? What you name your product is super important, because you want to make sure that it's something that can live on with beyond you. You've often seen companies that they spend the early part of their entrepreneurial journey branding the founder and branding the company, and then having a line of products. Well, when you go to sell a business, you're not selling the founder or the company name, unless it becomes something, unless it's Poppy or something like that. You're selling a product. And so you want to make sure that that product then can ultimately fit into somebody else's product portfolio without it. Because I mean, how many times have you seen supplements that have been named like after the founder? Jim's, IBS cure. That's great, but even if it's the greatest product in the world, I don't think Reckitt really wants Jim's IBS cure unless they're doing, 50 or $100 million in revenue.
Yeah, it's not brandable, right?
Yeah, exactly.
When you're thinking big scope, right? Because you're really that buyer who's going to buy your supplement company, they want to take it to the next level, right? They want to take it to the moon, right? So
that's the point. I mean, nobody's buying something to remain flat. They're buying it because they want to add the incremental revenue, incremental, net income, cash, and they also want to, add, more customers to their customer base. And so, they're not doing it because they're in love with the name of the company or the founder, typically.
exactly. Is there a particular multiple? You mentioned 13 multiple.
Yeah, I've seen over the years on a multiple EBITDA, it's about 13-ish is what the industry averages have seen. If you look at if you go to MBJ or something like that, and you see the year over year, the multiples are staying in that general ballpark.
Is it different for different business categories, or is that specific to supplements?
It's that's pretty across the board with supplements. I'm sure that in other categories, hey, if you get a really super hot category where there's scarcity and people are kind of bidding for a business, you'll see higher multiples. I mean, when we sold our business, it was an ingredient business, but it sold for 24.5 times EBITDA. And so, so you'll get those. And so, but, anywhere from the, 8 to 15 times is really reasonable and super attainable for an entrepreneur, so long as they run their business correctly.
So that multiple, that's based on top line revenue.
That's based on EBITDA. So that's based on basically your net income. So top line revenue numbers are tough because, as we know, I mean, I am not a direct consumer expert, but we know that revenue can be the margins can be destroyed by marketing and other things. And so, really because anybody can run a business that loses money every day, but not a lot of people buying them in the long run. That they're not great acquisition candidates. But it is interesting though, because when you have a business that is in a category that's like CBD back in the day, they were trading at higher multiples than average, and now not so much. But so it's a matter of none of us have crystal balls, so we can't go, okay, I want to sell the business in 7 years, and this market will be at the peak of its market in 7 years.
Right.
But we all kind of know which parts of the market, I would think, especially if the goal is to build a business to sell it, you want to make sure that it's something that is sustainable, that, not some sort of just flash in the pan. We're gonna, oh, here's a hot, we're gonna do a GLP product right now because that's the thing. But if that's your only thing, you may be depending on a trend that may not be around when it comes time for you to sell the business.
So other than EBITDA, what other numbers or metrics really are buyers looking for? And is it different based on the buyer?
It really is. It's different, but fundamentally, if I'm looking at a business, I would say, okay, how much recurring revenue did it have? Is it a subscription-based thing? It's nothing scarier than looking at a business that does not have any sort of recurring revenue model, which is why, I strongly encourage subscription models when people are going direct to consumer. It just makes it so much easier on the consumer, makes it easier on you, makes your revenue flatter, more predictable. So I think that one of the things that I've always looked at is what's their customer mix? How many customers do they have? What's their repeat purchase rate, which is super important. I mean, there's lots of supplements out there that people buy once or twice, but the repeat purchase rate, just for whatever reason, it's either consumers don't feel the difference, it's too expensive, or a combination of a whole bunch of things. But so really looking at, an efficient business that has, good working capital, that they're not having to rely on a bunch of debt in order to manage inventory and things, companies that can keep their inventory relatively low. I think people are just looking at efficiencies, but they're also looking for ways that they can drive internal efficiencies. So I just recently had a conversation with a company that's kind of a non-acquisition vendor right now, and they're a large ingredient company, and they're starting to buy consumer brands. And what they're looking for is consumer brands that use a lot of their ingredients. And so it's actually kind of brilliant. So they can grow their top line through the sale of the supplements or whatever it is that they're selling through the acquired business. But they can also transition that customer from maybe doing $20 million worth of purchasing from their competitors to switching, $20 million worth of ingredient purchasing or intermediary purchasing and things like that. And it makes them a much more, interesting acquisition candidate.
Right. There's got to be a synergy, right? Synergy between the buyer and the seller. Ingredients is one, right? There's operational efficiency.
Channels are another one. The direct to consumer channel is one where people are really focused on. The practitioner channel is one folks focus on, because there's a lot of repeat purchases in those spaces, and the margins can be good, and you're not spending tons of money, given a huge percentage of your revenue to a retailer or to Amazon. And then the nice thing is, when you're direct to consumers, you own those customers. It's just like, any B2B businesses or, anything like that. If you own the customer, you're in a great place versus somebody that sells through distribution. Maybe people that sell, if you look at the folks that are selling on Amazon, and it comes time where they're like, I'm going to take this direct, or I should be doing more direct. They don't know who those people are. They can no longer reach. They don't know who's been buying their product. And so, knowledge is power, and especially when it comes to knowing your customers. Knowing your customers is everything, so that you can adapt your business to the needs of those customers, and those customers will go along when that business sells, and they'll continue along as long as you've got a good, reliable product that really does what it says it's going to do.
Yeah, I mean, so much of it comes back to the product.
Yeah.
On that recurring revenue side, is there a specific percentage that is more attractive, or is it a dollar amount? How do we value that?
I generally look at it like it should be a majority of your income. I would see, if you're looking at an ideal situation and you're doing $10 million in revenue, it would sure be nice to see 60% of that revenue coming in on a recurring basis. You're always going to have drop offs and attritions, but the lower you can get that that drop off rate, the better. And so and there's really kind of neat ways that people are doing. I mean, I'm an advisor to a company called People Science. They do clinical trials, and it's kind of like a democratized trial process. But there's also a concept of doing kind of like N of one consumer studies. So like a supplement company, one of the things that I've been preaching about for half a dozen years is if I was to sell a supplement, I would also sell, along with that subscription, a way to monitor and track that supplement is doing something. So if I'm selling a sleep supplement, I'm giving an Aura ring to my customers.
Brilliant.
And I'm going to have a white label app that's going to show that since you started taking my product, you're sleeping better. I mean, it's just data is, especially for people, the direct to consumer supplement buyer tend to be the kind of the data people that listen to the podcasts. They're more educated. They're kind of self-educated, and I think the ability, in the probiotic world, if I was selling a probiotics subscription to somebody, I would every 6 months I'd send them a microbiome test. It's showing them that you care more about them than just shipping to them on time. You want to have a long-term partnership with your customers, and it's also an additional way to generate revenue. And there's partnerships you can do with labs that, like, say you need something where you need to do a blood draw every 6 months to see if it's really working. You make a deal with one of the private labs, and it's just part of the subscription. And they pop into Quest, they get their lab work done, and they find out, yes, in fact, my cholesterol is reducing since I started taking whatever. Then you don't have to make such strong claims where you're going to have to worry about the FTC or the FDA coming after you, because the consumers are proving it to themselves.
Brilliant strategy. Love it. Is there a specific revenue minimum that you have to be above in order to even consider sale?
Revenue is one of those things. If you talk to private equity firms, or if you talk to strategics that are buying brands, they almost always tell you they don't look at anything that has less than $1 million in EBITDA. I mean, that's just kind of like the floor. Does that mean there's nobody? I mean, private buyers will buy things with lower than that. But if you're a bigger company, if you're a private equity firm, you really don't have time to look at companies that are doing $200,000 in EBITDA, because it's just but that may be a great acquisition for another individual entrepreneur in the space that's like, I want to get into supplement business, a couple $100,000 EBITDA, I could buy that business for X, for $1.5 million or something like that. Maybe a great investment.
Right now we're not talking 13 times, right?
Yeah,
we're talking much less.
It may be 13 times, it may be 10, it may be, but when you're below $1 million in EBITDA, kind of metrics kind of start getting kind of wonky.
Gotcha. And it's a completely different seller, or
yeah,
rather, actually.
But that's typically, you'll hear people say, when you ask a private equity firm, what are you looking for? And you're like, it's got to have a minimum of $1 million in EBITDA. And some it's 5, some it's 10, some it's 25. The bigger ones. And so, but $1 million in EBITDA is a great goal to shoot for if you want to sell for kind of a premium.
Gotcha. I would think probably the higher the better.
Oh, of course.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the way I look at it. It's a multiple of that number. So if you're doing $1 million in EBITDA and you strike dead in the middle at 13 times, you're selling your company for $13 million.
How many $1 million supplement companies run past their desk every day?
Oh, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, and $1 million in EBITDA, that's a lift. I mean, it takes some work to get there, but once you get there, getting to 2 and to 3 and 4 and 5 isn't nearly as hard as getting from 0 to 1, as most people know that are trying to get their supplement business from 0 to, say, $1 million in revenue. It's just that first $1 million in revenue is just like climbing Everest, and all of a sudden you slip down and you're at 5.
Yeah. Is there any other important financial metrics we should be keeping track of? Like, we got EBITDA, we got recurring revenue, number of customers. You mentioned repeat purchase rate, the debt, how much debt the company has.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, do you have other investors? I mean, what is the ownership of the company? And then really, they'll dig into the marketing metrics and things like that in a direct to consumer business overall. Anybody's going to dig in. But I mean, it's really, like, how do you handle your cash? Is the business, have a good amount of working capital? What's their, how fast are they getting paid? I mean, the nice thing about direct to consumer is you're typically getting paid before you're paying your vendors. And so, unless you're buying large amounts of inventory and holding on to it and selling from inventory, a lot of times you may find yourself, on the positive side of cash flow, which is really nice.
Yeah, I would imagine that's way more attractive if you're in that position.
Yeah, if you're getting paid before you're paying your bills, that's something that's a beautiful green flag for an investor.
And if you're doing that, honestly, you might not want to sell, right? You've got a nice cash.
People sell for a million different reasons, right? I mean, it's a lot of times it's not just financial. Sometimes it's just like, I'm tired. I've been grinding for 5 years, 8 years, 9 years. I just want to take a break. And especially with the way some of the kind of direct to consumer solopreneur businesses, I mean, you can get them pretty big before you need to start adding a ton of staff. And it gets pretty tiring unless you've got some really, really nice automation built into the business.
Yeah, let's talk about that too, actually, because like beyond financials, right? There's the whole operational side of things. Is there anything on the operational side or operational metrics that makes a supplement business more attractive to buyers than others?
I think being very asset light for this type of business, being very asset light. I know that it's funny. The supplement industry is, as you very well know, it's full of characters and it's full of a lot of tinkerers. And I can't tell you how many people I've met when you talk to them about, their capsuling line or their whatever, and they're like, I built it myself, or whatever. You get these people that, and so, which is great, but it's because, and a lot of people also, entrepreneurs get into this thing where they like being able to go to the building where their warehouse is or where they're manufacturing. There are wonderful contract manufacturing companies all over the world, especially in the US. And so I strongly recommend to people, it's like, don't get into manufacturing, leave that to people that are manufacturing experts. Don't get into distribution yourself. Don't pack boxes yourself, because if you don't plan to scale, then when it's time to scale, it'll probably be too late because you'll already be too busy. So if you're in a point where you're packing, you're getting blister packs from your co-packer, and then you're putting them in boxes and you're shipping them off to consumers, that's fine for a bit, but that gets real old real fast. And it also, once it's time to scale, you need to make, people don't realize you can't just call a distribution company and say, hey, tomorrow I'm going to be really busy. Can I, ship you all these capsules to put into bottles and to boxes and then to put them into packers and ship them? It's a thing. And so I suggest, working with those companies right from the beginning, work with a co-packer. And in the perfect world, you find a co-packer that can make your supplements, put them in bottles, put them in boxes, and ship it for you. And you're starting to see those pop up where they're starting to do, on top of everything else, they're starting to do fulfillment. And, I mean, in my previous business, we didn't hold any inventory. Our inventory sat at our manufacturer's place. And so we didn't even carry the inventory on our books. And so that inventory, basically, as we bought and shipped, it came out of their inventory. And so, we set that up very early. We knew that we never wanted to be in the business of distribution, and we never wanted to be in the business of manufacturing. I mean, it only took 15 minutes to look, okay, do we want to build our own fermentation facility? $50 million? Nope.
Yeah.
We're like, because we're probably going to sell this to somebody who may have some fermentation capacity.
Right.
And same thing with a supplement company. You may find that it may be your co-packer that wants to buy the business. Who knows? You just never know who may be interested. And so being as asset light and as cash positive as possible is always a great thing.
Getting back to the product a little bit, right? How does like proprietary formulations factor into the valuation, or just generic? Like, can you really, I guess, build a company to sell if you don't have a unique formulation? Because then it's really all marketing, right? If you have enough customers, maybe you can.
I'm generally a proponent of having some sort of uniqueness in what it is you do. I've never been one that's like, wow, vitamin C is a big thing. Let's go put vitamin C in capsules and see if we can sell them. It's more like, looking at trends, figuring out what's happening. Proprietary blends, I'm a proponent of proprietary blends so long as you disclose what's in that proprietary blend. I'm not a fan of proprietary blends.
Does that make it less attractive for a buyer?
I think it does. I think for the main reason in that, you know, eventually we're going to get to a point regulatorily in this country where proprietary blends, I hope, will have to be labeled. I mean, who knows what's in a proprietary blend? I mean, if it's a pre-workout and they're like, it's our proprietary blend, I mean, what's in it? How much caffeine? How much taurine? How much this? Because what's in it could affect the consumer. And so what I love to see people do is make a blend, non-proprietary blend, but make their blend. So here we have the Bobby blend, and you call it that, and you trademark it that, and if you work with somebody and you even do a small clinical trial on it, you trademark that blend name, even if it's other people's ingredients. You trademark that blend, you do your clinical study on that blend, and then all of a sudden you have a proprietary position, because when you have a trademarked and copywritten, you've got a trademarked blend name, somebody else can't go, hey, here's a clinical study on this blend that we're doing too, because they'll be infringing on your trademark by using your published clinical study. It's kind of a way to own the formulation without having to go to the extreme of like patenting it, which is another option. I mean, you can always patent formulations, depending upon who your ingredient supplier is. But so it's like, whatever you do, you have to make it yours. And so rather than making it just kind of a generic something, so the more you can do to put trademarks around what you're doing, or put IP around what you're doing, that makes the company far more valuable than just even if you have a kind of a Me Too product, but you figure out a way to really turn it into a proprietary or a trademarked thing. It just makes a lot of sense, because then you own it. It gives you something that you own beyond the trademark of the brand itself.
It's a brilliant strategy. Again, second gold nugget dropped here in this episode.
I know that we did this in the probiotic world. I mean, we originally patented our organism. We can't patent organisms anymore, and so what we did is we trademarked the strain name, the actual designation that's at the where you deposit your bacteria. So we trademarked the strain name, so it made it so competitors, even when the patent was up, they couldn't use our clinical studies, because the clinical studies all had the patented strain name in it. And so, and at first they're like, we can't patent a strain name, and I'm like, well, here you can't trademark a strain name, and I was like, well, here's our trademark documents, and so there's always a way to protect yourself if you look around.
Yeah, brilliant.
And if there isn't, maybe got a bad idea.
That's true. When I'm working with supplement clients, I'm always kind of advising them to pick a bleeding neck problem, right? Like vitamin C is not a bleeding neck problem that you mentioned earlier, right? Something that the customer really can't find on the shelves of their supermarket or their grocery store, right? And really kind of build a business around a flagship product. There's typically one product that sells better than any other products, right? And then complementary products to that around the same problem, right? So you have 2 or 3 supplements that are solving the same problem. Maybe max, like you can get to a $50 million supplement company with 7 to 10 products. You don't need hundreds of products.
Oh, sure.
But my question for you is, how important is that customer concentration, right? Like if we have a lot of customers in this one health niche problem, because 4 of our supplements are supporting that one health niche, and the other 3 are kind of, there's other niches, but they're not in that main. So our customer concentration then is more concentrated in that one problem. And we have a little bit of customers in problem number 2 and a little bit of problem number 3.
I'd say if your flagship products meet where your concentration is, it makes you, I mean, if you think about it, if I'm, somebody and I want to buy a supplement business ultimately, or I want to value a supplement business, and I look at it and I go, oh, they have 10% of their customers spread across 10 product lines. It's like, wow, I kind of would be like, well, why isn't one of these products great? It's like, what's great about this business other than just you got everybody buying a little bit of everything. And so the flagship product, I think, really, and the nice thing about D2C businesses in particular is you can have one product that's really the hero product that just drives revenue and drives attention, and you brand the company on that one product, and then you can start expanding. It's kind of like, like Seed did, or some of the companies that literally, or Armra. I mean, it's a single
Ritual. Ritual is a great example of that.
It's a single product. Well, then they start adding SKUs if they want, but in a lot of times when you see them adding SKUs is when they've decided that they're big enough that they have to start going retail. Because I mean, retailers don't want one product on the shelf; they want a set, right? I mean, they want 3-5 different SKUs from the same company. They don't want to have 400 different suppliers supplying 400 different products. And so I think that customer concentration is actually a really good thing to build value in your business, because say that you're starting a supplement business for people that have had bariatric surgery. Well, and you may have some other supplements that you sell as well to different people, but having that captured audience in the ears of that bariatric customer, somebody that's going to be on these supplements for the rest of their life, is a really good thing. And so, especially when you look at these populations of people where if they take this particular supplement, they may be on it forever, which is great.
Yep. Customer for life. Really high lifetime value.
Right now, I work with a company and they're about to start going to market, but they make a probiotic. And while it does, it's very simple. It breaks down the compound that causes chronic kidney stones. And so I've never had a kidney stone, but I understand that they're not very fun. And I do understand that if you've had one, you would pretty much do about anything to not have another one. And then the people that are having like 3 or 4 a year, these people will do anything. And so, and they would have to be on this product forever. And they would be more than happy to be on it forever. For if it's $70 a month or $50 a month, whatever it is, it sure beats a kidney stone.
Absolutely.
And so their customer concentration is going to be very concentrated on people who have chronic kidney stones. But they're also, hopefully, if the product works as well as clinicals are showing it will, it'll be a really loyal group of customers.
How important is having your supplement brand in retail before you go to sell? Because that's something that is kind of not as attractive, because a buyer would be like, we can take this to retail and really blow it up. That's opportunity for us, versus I'm already in retail and I want to sell. I'm selling online too. I'm selling on Amazon and direct and retail.
I think it really depends on the business and the goal. If you're like, I'm going to get this to $50 million or $100 million, you may need to go to retail. You may need to be on Amazon, retail, and everything else. If the goal is to really focus and build a business that you can sell in a number of years, that's very focused and very targeted, I don't think retail is necessary at all. I mean, there's a lot of products that I buy on a regular basis that I can't buy at retail, but I buy them all the time.
I completely agree. Retail is a whole different game.
Yeah, and it's a margin killer. I mean, if you think about it, if you're going to sell on a multiple of EBITDA, you are doing something intentionally, which is going into retail, that is going to really wreck your EBITDA.
Right, your numbers are going to be horrible.
So your math that you did early, when you're like, we're going to be direct to consumer and we need to do $4 million in revenue to get to sell the company for X. Now you're at retail and all of a sudden your EBITDA. So now you're like, oh crap, now I need $7.5, $10 million in revenue at retail to equal the same EBITDA as I do. It's just kind of one of those things. It's like, it could be the kiss of death. And you've seen it. You've seen brands do really well, go to retail and die because the retailer doesn't support them.
Yeah, it's a totally different ocean, right? Completely different sharks in that ocean than online.
Yeah.
How about Amazon and Walmart.com? Would you consider those also kind of diluting the EBITDA, or would that be adding to it?
I mean, they knock your margin down a little bit, but not as bad as retail. I mean, anytime you go through an online, channel other than your own, there's going to be they're not doing it for free, and so it's going to eat up your margin. But as long as it's not killing you, and if it can get you to your EBITDA level faster because it gets your revenue higher, then great. But it needs to be really well thought out, and you need to think, if am I able and willing to give up this, whatever it is, 20 points of margin or whatever it is, to go online to, through Amazon or Walmart or whoever else.
So that could potentially be a pitfall, right? Are there any other pitfalls or mistakes that you see supplement companies making when preparing for an exit?
I think one of the biggest mistakes that you'll see is a lot of companies, they'll be like, okay, we're going to get ready we're thinking we might want to sell this business. And then it becomes, and it's less of a selling function as it is people start becoming too concerned about fixing up the business and fixing the deficiencies that they should have and putting systems in place that they should have had in place a long time ago. And so you'll see people switching contract manufacturers, trying to, save a couple bucks, and all of a sudden their quality slips. Or you'll see them, I've seen companies make really weird decisions when it comes time to get ready to sell a business, in the hope that they can make their business look better, also known in the industry as putting lipstick on a pig. And so if you have to do that, you did something wrong early on in the business. And so it should just be, you have predictable plans, always have backup plans, always have backup suppliers, always have more cash than you need. And as long as you stick with your plan, you should be okay.
Right. And I imagine the buyers would really look as far back from the beginning, right? There's not like, we're not looking at the last 3 years. Like, we want to look at the whole.
You're going to look at life to date on everything. And so and it's funny too, because you'll see companies that are going to sell and say that like 3 years into the business was their peak of their sales. And they may be dropping off a little bit. Say they're 10% off of their peak, but they're not growing. Bad. It's like, if you feel as though the growth of your whether it's your own fault, your limitations of you technically, if you feel as though growth is gonna slow for some reason, put the pedal to the ground and get ready to sell the business, because you don't want to be in a situation where you're on the back end of the growth curve. People are looking for continuously growing businesses when they're acquiring businesses. Nobody's looking for if they're looking at flat growth businesses or declining businesses, you're certainly not going to get anywhere close to the average multiples on the business. So you want to make sure that you're picking the right time to sell the business, rather than, oh no, things are going bad, let's make it look nice and sell it.
Right. Now, obviously, the bigger the growth, the better, right? From month over month or year over year. Is there a minimum? Like, if we just had 2% growth every year for the last 3 years, is that attractive? Or
2?
Yeah.
No, I would say, I mean, if I look at a growth company and it's not doing, 20% a year or 25% a year, especially a high growth, a startup-y type company, there's probably a problem. I mean, if you look at a mature business, I mean, even I just saw a number the other day, the growth numbers on Kool-Aid are better than 2% a year. And so it's kind of like one of those things, like, if the brand's not growing, it's not worth really looking at, unless you, the acquirer, know something that they don't know. If you're like, if we get a hold of this, I mean, because you'll see it sometimes where they'll be like, if we get a hold of this, we can blow it up. But you're not going to get the maximum value out of your business.
Gotcha. So let's switch gears a little bit and talk about like what the selling process really looks like. Right? Can you walk me through like a typical M&A process for a supplement?
I'll take you through kind of a traditional process where you go out and hire a banker. So you've got that $1 million in EBITDA, and you want, or at least, and you can start talking to bankers, investment bankers. There's 5 or 6 really good bankers in our space that are specialized in our space, and so you go out and you interview them, you figure out what it's going to cost you, what their process is, and what you want is to find a banker that says, "Here's where we start. This is what we do." And this is when we're going to close on your business. And so you want somebody that really has a process. And so you engage that banker, typically I would suggest that people don't use your cousin, the estate attorney. Go find a deal attorney that's and usually the investment banker will have a couple of recommendations. They usually have people they like working with, or they've seen do good work. You get a banker and a lawyer, and then you start the process. And by the time, and I encourage people before they start that process to, talk to a banker a couple of years ahead of time, really develop a relationship. There's a lot to be said about having a relationship with a banker, because they can tell you what the trends are, and they can tell you what, because they may be working on buy side deals where they're like actively out looking for companies for a buyer. So they give good advice, and they'll tell you, and it's free. It's talking to an investment banker early on it costs you nothing, and you develop that relationship so that you know that you're heading in the right direction. They'll kind of guide you a little bit. You select your banker, your lawyer, and then you start the process. And they literally the banker then starts going out and sending your teaser out to people saying, project XYZ is a ashwagandha direct to consumer product business that's growing outrageously, and so they'll send out a teaser, and then management presentations will start in the interested parties, and then you'll get thousands and thousands of questions of due diligence, from the most things that you think are totally insignificant. And so one of the things, it was funny, just recently I was working with an entrepreneur, and they were talking about, they're like, we've done all this before, but they're from a different industry. And I said, get a due diligence request list from a recent transaction. I go, you have to know. I mean, he knew somebody. And so he called and he said, can I see like the list of questions that was asked by the company that bought you guys? And it was a lot of questions. I mean, I'm not exaggerating. It was hundreds and hundreds of questions that they had to answer, that they had to provide data for, everything from, have you ever had an insurance claim, to workers' comp, to let's see your employee manual if you have employees, and all this kind of stuff. So if you have all that ahead of time and it's just done, then you don't have to disrupt your business, because selling a business that you're not prepared to sell is incredibly disruptive. And the one thing you do not want to have happen during that whole process is have a slight hiccup in sales. So you don't want to be distracting to the business, because if you're selling the business and you're at your peak revenue in December, and you go into a process in January, and you're starting management meetings in May or June, and all of a sudden May's like a terrible month, and you just it just falls apart, and then June's not so great, your valuation goes way down. And it may be a 2-month hiccup, but it happens to be at the wrong time. And so, So it's really important that the business not be distracted away from their normal course of business, and stays busy, making sure that the forecast, because if you go into a process in January, you're going to have a number. You're going to say, this is what we're going to do. If I hired a banker and I'm selling my business and I want to sell it in 2025, and I hire them in January, and I've got my budget, my forecast pinned down for 2025, I better hit it. Like, you better nail every single number. And so, which is why it's really good for people to really understand the metrics and financials of their business, so that they know they're going to be okay. And so then at that point, it really becomes, depending upon the type of process, like if it's a standard kind of auction process, the banker will say, you have such and such a date to express interest, and then such and such a date to do your due diligence, and then we're hoping to close on such and such a date, and then away you go. And so it can be, if run well, it can be a 6 to 9 month process. with the pre-work that you're doing, interviewing and things like that, the year before. But it's for me, it's always been a really fun and exciting process. And I talk to other people, but I mean, I've done this a lot of times. Ganadian was I think the seventh company that I was part of the sale of, and so it's always been kind of fun. And it's like you start really getting a feel for what you need to do, and but it can be pretty intimidating as well, because you'll look at it, you're like, I have to do my especially for people that if you're a small business, you're like, I have to do all my regular work, and I have to get shipments out the door and all this other kind of stuff, and I've got to answer 700 questions
Yeah.
on minutia of like what happened, why were returns high in November of 21,
Wow.
and saying I don't know is never an answer.
No.
And believe me, I've looked at I've seen a lot of due diligence packets where we don't have that information, or I don't know, or we'll have to find that out. And I'm just kind of like, oh, that's bad.
So is a bad answer like better than an I don't know answer?
Well, it should be a good answer, right? It should be an answer backed up by data, and so data is everything in when we're doing this, because if you say something, you have to be able to show them that here's the data that supports it. Here, and so if you have the data, that's great. If you literally don't have the data and they're asking you something, just say that's something we don't track. But I've seen people go, oh, it's a question, we have to answer it. Sometimes it's like it's irrelevant to your business. Sometimes they'll say, what's your whatever, what's your shipping cost? And you're like, oh, I don't ship anything. Everybody picks it up at my house. I don't know what the thing may be. But there are times where you're going to just not be able to answer a question because it doesn't relate to you, because it's not like they're going to, if somebody's got a large due diligence list, they've used it before, and so it may not all apply to you, but just do your best.
Gotcha. So that's a more traditional sale, right? So what is the other?
The other way would be, doing it yourself, which is, I mean, with a smaller business, it's not a huge deal.
I know it sounds kind of like a nightmare from what you just described.
Yeah, but I mean, if say you have a business that you're going to sell for $5 million, and you're doing 500,000 in EBITDA, you're doing 5 million, you're doing $1 million in revenue, something, $1.5 million in revenue, whatever the number is, and you decide it's maybe time I want to sell this business. Hopefully, you have a big enough network where you can just kind of start reaching out to your network and say, hey, I'm thinking about maybe transacting this business in the next year. Let me know if you'd be interested. If maybe it's something that you're like, this would be something that Pharmavite may be interested in, or here's 10 companies. But remember, when you started your business, you got a pretty good idea for who the potential acquirers for your business were, because your business should be something that plugs a hole for somebody who is looking to expand their business. So if you say, I want to sell this business to Reckitt, or RB, then you need to say, what gaps does RB have in their product lines, and do we fill it? And if the answer is, oh, they already have this, then take them off your list. They're not probably going to buy your business. And so, but it's really finding the gap, and then just networking and knowing people, and letting people know that you're potentially interested in doing something. And then at that point, you should be able to use a reasonably good transactional attorney, and they can handle everything for you as far as all the nuts and bolts. And it's just having a banker just allows you to go way more broad. Lets you have opportunities to get in front of people that you'd never even heard of in some cases.
Right. So you have like maybe some guidelines of like, use a banker if you want to sell for this, but
I'd say that if you're doing over $1 million in EBITDA, you're probably doing yourself a disservice not at least talking to a banker, because I think that it's just, unless you have a really good relationship with a very special strategic that that you've got a direct path in, I'd say that you maybe, it's kind of like, if you live somewhere and you think, I can sell this house myself for, but a realtor may be able to get it in front of more people. It may not be the best example, but I mean, but it's like, sometimes you need somebody who specializes in selling what you do. But I'd say less than $1 million in EBITDA, you're probably not going to get a banker even to talk to you to begin with. And if you do, they're probably more like a business broker than a real investment banker, and they're going to list you right alongside the like company that tars roofs and things like that.
Gotcha. So how can you help anyone listening? Like,
Yeah, I'd encourage people that want to, buy the book. It's on Amazon, it's on Audible, it's on Barnes and Noble and some other places. But I mean, really, what I do is I help people. One of the most fun things I do, period, is in addition to boards and advising and stuff, is I do workshops. And so I'll come in for a day, sometimes 2 days, and we'll come in and we'll bring in, I encourage the team to be there. I mean, everybody from maybe like the last one I did, I had the investors, the board, the management team, and the staff that was doing things all in this couple-day meeting. And we sat down and we, did who are we going to sell to for how much? What does EBITDA need to be? What does revenue need to be? Okay, now we can build our financial model off of that. And then it became, let's look at all of the initiatives we have in the works and determine which ones are going to build value to get us to that exit at that time for that value, for that amount. And so this particular company had like 5, growth initiatives, and we killed 3 of them. We were just like, those 3, they're either going to take too long, they're too iffy, or they're distractionary. So let's focus really hard on these 2 and move forward with that. And so by the time we were done, we had a roadmap that took them from literally the start of their business to what the exit looks like. And we were able to then start building a plan along the way. Do you go to retail? Do you go direct to consumer? Do you go physician? Do you go to practitioner channel? And we made those decisions, and then everybody agreed. So not only did the management team agree, but the investors and board agreed, and the employees agreed. And so, and I'm doing it right now with a 2-person company where we're sitting down and doing the exact same thing. There's literally only 2 people in their company, and their challenge is, what are we going to do to grow this business so that if you 2 don't exist anymore, it's still valuable? Because right now the value in this business is the 2 founders. And so we're working on a plan to make the business valuable without them. And it's a complete shift in the way they're doing their business. But it's the only way they're going to be able to get out of the business to sell it. So I love doing the workshops. People can find out about them at my website, growthways.com. And like I said, the book, read the book, and it gives you all the answers that you need anyway. I tried to make it so that it's a kind of a coast to coast read. I wanted to have something nice and simple that you could read on a cross country flight, or the Audible, I think, is 4 hours long or something like that. So I didn't want to write a tome that nobody was going to finish.
Yeah, no, really great foundational book for anyone interested in supplements, who has a supplement business, right? It's like really thinking about it strategically from day one. Yeah. That's really what I liked about it.
And what it does is, in one of the premises, there's 2 premises of the book. It's destination first and making good decisions. And the good decisions thing becomes, it has to become part of your culture and your mindset. And when I say good decisions, I mean, they don't hurt other people. They're good for the business. They're good for you. They're good for the environment. They're good for potential investors, shareholders, everybody. And if along the way you go, this is a great idea, but boy, it's not good for this population, or it maybe isn't the most ethical way to deal with our contract manufacturer. Whatever the situation may be, if it's not a good decision, don't do it. It's going to hurt value. It may not feel like it's going to, but it's kind of like, if you don't feel good about a decision, don't do it. And so it's a pretty simple way to live life, I guess.
Well, like we were talking about before we hit record, right? It's simple but difficult.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think aren't the most important things simple,
Absolutely, right? Exercise and diet are simple, but they're difficult to do.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Well, it's been a pleasure. Growthways.com is the best place to reach you.
Yep, absolutely.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Michael.
Thanks, Bobby.
Creative Thirst is a direct response digital agency. We work with dietary supplement companies who are struggling to maximize the profitability of their funnels so they can scale. We've optimized many dietary supplement businesses. And in that time, we've uncovered the 3 critical funnels for success. You can get that free report by going to creativethirst.com. Scroll down to the appropriate section and click on the blue Get Your ebook button.